Boom. All right. So about us, lacuna, it literally is an unfilled space or an interval. It's a Latin word for gap. And our goal at Lacuna is to bridge that gap from where you are today and where you want to be in the future. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Erin Berube. I'm a certified professional coach and chief development officer of Lacuna. I'm a retired corporate leader. Recently came out of CVS Health after a 15-year career leading teams across various industries, and now working in Lacuna full-time, coaching and consulting. I'm an avid hiker and mountain climber, and I'm also a food insecurity advocate here in the Baltimore area. So now I'll turn it over to Giselle to introduce herself.
Hey guys, my name is Giselle Herlin. If you don't already know me, I'm the Chief Mindfulness Officer and co-founder of LACUNA. I have a background in math, business, and yoga. I love traveling and leaving people and places better than I found them. I teach yoga and mindfulness, and my personal practice stems most frequently from my two young boys as my teachers. So let's go into what we do. Here's a little word cloud for you on the things that we do. Our purpose at LACUNA is to guide you in your journey from where you are now to where you want to be. How? We help you find the connection between your inner ambitions and passions and your outer goals. Using decades of collective experience between Erin and I and mindfulness, we commit to developing strategies with you that bring about extraordinary and sustainable results. We offer coaching, including a deep dive into your own energy, discovering how you show up to your everyday life, and how to improve your energy levels in high stress situations. It's kind of it helps us stand out. I've not seen anything. This is Erin's specialty, and I've not seen anything like it in the world that has had as big of impacts on companies as that. We also offer yoga and meditation sessions and mindfulness courses, showing you how to integrate mindfulness into your work and everyday life. And then we offer retreats. This is our baby right here. And now virtual retreats too during the pandemic, where we coach you and your team to lead, inspire, mentor, and handle difficult situations while guiding you to find your own trajectory in career and in life. Just to note, we have a 4-week mindfulness program coming up this spring if you're interested in expanding your awareness, and retreat options in the Virginia Blue Ridge Mountains this fall. For more information, make sure to check out our website at lacunaleaders.org. All right, let's dive in. Like all things should, we'll start today with mindfulness. In its simplest description, mindfulness is uncluttered attention. More in depth, it's a higher quality of awareness, specifically where our perception of what's happening in the moment is not distorted, most frequently by judgment or an inherent bias. Without mindfulness, there is no true understanding. There is no complete insight. And I submit that mindfulness is the basis of both of those. Does this bring up any questions for you? Does anyone need any clarity on that? You can throw it up in the chat or go ahead and speak. Okay. Well, with the idea of mindfulness clarified, we'll take our first poll. How often do you practice mindfulness? That should pop up for you. Never, sometimes, most of the time, or I'm mindful as 50 Cent, who is actually an avid meditator.
All right, looks like we've got a few more folks to vote. A couple more out here. Okay, great. 5 more seconds and then we'll end the poll. If you haven't voted yet, go ahead and do it. Okay.
All right. So we've got some never, some sometimes, and a couple most of the time. All right, cool. Then I really hope you take away some, wherever you are on that spectrum, it's just kind of cool for me to know. And it's nice to think about, hey, do I actually do that? To stop and pause and kind of observe yourself in having that kind of experience. So really cool to know. Hope you guys get something from this first mindfulness exercise. We'll model how to do it. Okay. So we'll do a mindfulness session right now, an exercise called Mindless to Mindful. So we'll begin this mindfulness exercise by sending your arms out to your sides, parallel to the floor. Exhale completely. Through the nose, take a deep breath in and exhale through the mouth as slowly as you can. Holding your arms where they are, take one more full cycle of breath on your own. Now lower your arms. Now to yourself, maybe with your eyes closed, just relax and try to envision or describe with as many details as possible how you raised your arms. Recall if you made any adjustments before raising them. How did you hold your hands? Did you feel the weight of your arms? Were your shoulders tense or relaxed? Where was your gaze? What were you thinking? How did your body feel? Take a deep breath in and a slow breath out. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to raise your arms again. But this time, I want you to be hyper aware of exactly what you do and how you feel in that short process. Okay, please raise your arms parallel to the ground. Inhale. Exhale. Deep inhale. Slow exhale. Now relax your arms. To yourself, what did you notice the second time? What did it feel like to be aware of your movements? Now in the chat, type up to one line to describe the second arm raising experience or the difference between the first and second arm raising experiences. And it can be one word or one sentence. Go ahead and throw it in the chat. Ooh. Strength, more aware, less tense, more focused attention, breath. Loving these. More meaningful. More purposeful. Aware of the movements. Saul, what movement did you notice the second time that you didn't think about the first?
I noticed that I pull out the arms and then extend the arms second. So it's like two movements.
Interesting. That's a really cool observation. Thanks. Okay. Now, show of hands, who did something differently the second time when you were paying attention? Or you can say me or write me in the chat so I can see because we're sharing yeah. Type it in the chat. I think that's going to be helpful. If you did something differently, you can even say not me if it wasn't you.
Got a lot of hand raises going on.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So we are creatures of many minute habits. We get proficient at things like raising our arms, standing up, brushing our teeth, washing our hands, walking to get the mail, even driving to work when we used to do that we don't even think about what we're doing when we're doing it. And that's mostly okay. Like a lot of times that's all right. You don't need to think about each stroke of the toothbrush to brush your teeth well, right? We get proficient at it. But notice how even in the simplest things, your awareness can change how you do things. Your awareness changes your experience. Do you think that might also be the case if you bring awareness to the bigger, more important things that you do? Think about an area of your life where the use of mindfulness might improve how you do it. Just take a moment to think about it. Practicing mindfulness on these small, mindless activities helps you cultivate that mindfulness muscle. What physically happens when you practice mindfulness and take that pause is a rewiring of neural pathways in the brain. And every time you practice it, every time you pause before you react, that pathway is reinforced. This is the pathway that helps you create space to respond more intentionally and more genuinely on the big stuff, no longer out of habit. What questions or comments do you have on your experience in this mindfulness exercise? Any questions? All right.
There's none in the chat so far.
Cool. Thank you, Nate. All right. So, pardon me. We'll go to our next slide, which is practicing mindfulness. So how do you practice mindfulness? What we just modeled was an example of one way, and that's slowing down our tasks, becoming hyper aware of what we're doing. What you can add to that experience is tapping into all of your senses. Sight is a really common one. Like what do you see? What do you notice with your eyes? But also, what do you hear? How does it smell, taste, and feel? The next one is similar, making observations outside of your norm. Let's say you're walking your typical walk, either for exercise or just from your apartment to your car. Excuse me. Take the time to notice something that you don't normally notice. Their mailbox looks just like a wagon from the Oregon Trail. There's a bird's nest in that tree. Her hair has a barrette in it. Notice there's no judgment in any of those things. You're not judging it, but just bringing your awareness to what's in front of you right now in this moment. Another way is to reject your habitual way of doing something. If you always do something a certain way every time, choose to do it differently. If you normally put your right pant leg on first, try putting it on your left. When you wash your hands, squirt the soap into the opposite hand you usually do. That forces you to have to think about what you're doing and brings you into the present moment. Meditation is the last way I'll mention here. There are many different forms, but sitting in stillness is the fastest way to see the results outside of your practice. If you'd like a small pamphlet on meditation tips and more mindfulness techniques, it looks like this. Feel free to email me or simply say me with an all caps exclamation point in the chat so I know to look you up and send you an email with this in it. I'll give you one that my son hasn't colored on, but it'll just be an email one. So, and then I want to go over some of the benefits of mindfulness. If you're like, okay, what is all this for anyway? Peaceful moments throughout your day. That sounds nice, but that's what mindfulness can bring. Expanded awareness, more understanding and insight, and appreciation for things just as they are, without judgment, without categorizing them as good or bad, better or worse than. And then again, finding the space after a stimulus to choose a genuine and intentional response. Are there any questions?
Not a question, but Christy in the chat said that it's mind-body awareness while exercising is one way that she experiences
So
it.
important. That's really, really cool. That's how you stay safe. It'll keep you really safe in your movements. Awesome. Thanks so much for that. I hope that was helpful for you. And I want to turn it over and so we can dive into imposter syndrome. Erin, take her away.
Sounds good. Thanks for that, Giselle. So now that we're all in our calm and aware and peaceful mindsets, it's going to make it a lot easier for you to retain what you hear today. So that's exciting. And before we can tackle the imposter monster, we have to understand what it is first. So in your words, how would you define imposter syndrome? Go ahead and add it to the chat. Don't be shy. It can be just a couple of words. Sentence. Thinking you are not good enough. Feeling unqualified. Insecurity. Wow. These are powerful. The fear of being found out that I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Yep. Feeling like others are more qualified than you. Absolutely. These are all great, great responses here. telling myself a story that I'm not good enough. That's what's key, right? It's recognizing that it's a story versus fact. And then people are going to realize I don't belong. These are awesome, awesome pieces of feedback that you all have here. And this shows that you're in the right place today. So first, I'm going to tell you my definition of it, which is self-doubt that leads to fear. Because as you can see, you know, it shows up differently for everyone. But at the end of the day, it's the self-doubt that leads to fear. And this fear can be people finding out that you're not as good as your resume says, or not as polished as your social media account might show that you are. And this fear results in not taking the next steps to go after the things that you want. I see Ava Scott, when you're in your head and self-sabotaging, yeah, that's absolutely what can happen with imposter syndrome. So Giselle, tell me, when have you experienced imposter syndrome? What's one example that you have?
My imposter monster still shows up for me when I'm about to share my knowledge. Like even to this, like it's still progress and something that I'm still working on. This story comes up in my mind that I really don't have that much to offer, that the things that I care to share are common knowledge and I won't meet people's expectations. And that terrifies me.
Yeah. And it makes perfect sense that you feel that way. So many people feel that way about the imposter syndrome. So we're going to launch a second poll here because I'm curious, when does imposter syndrome show up for you? Because it can show up in multiple different areas. So click all that apply on the poll in front of you, and we'll leave this open for about 10 seconds. So go in and click all the places where imposter syndrome shows up for you. Relationships, work, kids. Yeah, look at that. Okay, work is definitely the strong one, with a close second being relationships. So let's go ahead and share the results with everyone so you can see it. So work is the number one here, relationships a close second, and then also kids, sports, others. So what's important here to recognize is that it's not just one place. Imposter syndrome doesn't just exist in one place in your life. It can show up in all aspects of your life, right? Wow, okay, so thank you guys so much for that feedback on that poll. What I want to do before we dive in is cover some myths about imposter syndrome. And if you've been following us on social the last couple of weeks, you might have seen the videos that I've posted about these. Let's take a moment to dispel these and go through them together. So myth number one is that imposter syndrome only happens to women. As you can see, we have a pretty strong male representation in this meeting today, right? And the feedback that we've gotten in the polls, it's just not the case. Men and women experience imposter syndrome in various ways. Another myth about imposter syndrome is that it only happens at work. That poll that we just did just completely dispelled that, right? Talk to any parent, and I'm sure that they'll have an example of when they felt like an imposter with their kids. When my son throws a tantrum, my imposter monster tells me it's my fault. If I was a better parent, if I was more like the parent that I show I am on Instagram, for example, right, my son wouldn't behave that way, right? So it can show up in so many different ways. Myth number three, it goes away as you move up the ladder or as you accomplish more things. This just isn't true. And for me, I'll share my story shortly, but it was the opposite. The higher that I climbed up the corporate ladder, the more I feared somebody would find out that I didn't know what the hell that I was doing. So in LinkedIn did a study recently in October that showed 70% of respondents have experienced imposter syndrome, including 52% of CEOs. Just this year, right? And some famous, incredibly accomplished people are known to have experienced imposter syndrome, including Albert Einstein and Maya Angelou. Researchers who have studied the two of them found that there's no threshold of accomplishment that puts these imposter feelings at rest. So no matter how many things you accomplish, no matter how many awards you win or how many promotions you get, if you don't tackle it through a process like what we're going to teach you today, it will continue to linger. And myth number four is that the imposter syndrome is always a bad thing. This isn't true. That feeling of being an imposter, it can sometimes indicate that you're chasing a big opportunity, something that you've never done before, or maybe something that's never been done before by anyone. And how exciting is that, right? The key question there is, how long will you allow that feeling of being an imposter to get in the way of what you want to achieve? Right. Okay. So let's move on here. We told you in the beginning that we'd share a 3-step process to overcoming the imposter monster. To do this, I'm going to tell you a story about myself and how I defeated the imposter monster while walking you through each step. And then at the end, we'll summarize the steps and open it up for discussion. But first, I want to introduce you to my imposter monster, the Stay Puffed Marshmallow Man. Right? He looks pretty terrifying in this picture, actually. The science of psychology tells us that giving a name to our stressor helps diminish its power over us. So I want you all to take a moment and name your imposter monster. Share it in the chat. What is your monster's name? If you gave it a name, what would you call it? Let's see some names pop up in here. Rex, I love it. It's a dinosaur. That's great. What else we got? What other names do you have? Give your imposter monster a name. You're all here because you've had this experience, right? What would you call that person? The devil, Michigan. I love Michigan. The ghost of Giselle's future. Ooh, that's a good one. That's a good one. All right, so be thinking about that, because when you give a name to something that stresses you out, it really does diminish its power. Because when I think about these feelings of being an imposter, I'm thinking about the Stay Puffed Marshmallow Man, which isn't entirely serious, right? It diminishes its power. We've got human, what is that? Mirror image, weakness. Oh, human weakness, yes. Okay, great. So what I wanna do next is I wanna talk to you about energy progression, because we'll need this later. Energy progression says that thoughts lead to emotions and emotions lead to actions. So if you want to change the action, you need to start with the thought. And here's an example. If you think you're going to fail and you feel self-doubt, excuse me, and you feel really, really anxious about that, not very confident, right? Because you think you're going to fail, you're not going to make the move forward, and that's the action. The beautiful thing about this concept is that you have complete control over the thoughts and the stories that you tell yourself. And I'll repeat that. You have complete control over your thoughts. And like Giselle said earlier, these thoughts, they create neural pathways in your brain. You are physically changing your brain when you think something over and over and over. The more you think it, the stronger that path becomes. And because you get to choose what thought you want to have, which path do you want to create, right? Knowing that the thought is the key, what thought do you want to have? We'll talk about that here in a minute. Another thing that's important to note is that every thought you tell yourself is doing one of two things. It's either inflating your imposter monster, or it's poking a hole in it and deflating it. So all these names that you have, Michigan, Rex, mirror image, human weakness, whatever you've named your imposter, you are choosing with each thought to make it bigger or to make it smaller. The choice truly is yours. Okay, so before I dive into step 1 here, any questions? Throw them up in the chat if you've got them, and we'll take a pause every once in a while. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on here. A little over 2 years ago, I was on maternity leave after my son Logan was born. And Logan was born around the same time as Giselle's first son, Chapman. So we got to enjoy those early months together as new moms, sharing our horror stories and YouTubing how to keep our kids alive. And I would sit there, sleep deprived, exhausted, trying to calm my colicky baby. And I would imagine that I was in another place, like the mountains. I love to travel, and it's a personal goal of mine to get my passport stamped in a different country every year. So as I was in this post-birth fog caring for Logan, I kept thinking about how badly I wanted to travel. And at the same time, I had an executive coach that I was working with, and I was learning how to take my own experiences and turn them into development lessons for my teams at work. So at some point in this maternity fog, an idea popped into my head. And I immediately texted Giselle with, what if we could get paid to travel and teach people all the things that we didn't learn in the corporate world or in our MBA programs? We could teach how to have difficult conversations, how to negotiate, how to influence without authority. All of these things would be centered around mindfulness and the yoga practice that Giselle leads. And Giselle responded with, I'm in, and the LACUNA retreats were born. And I knew in that moment that LACUNA was my destiny, that I would leave the corporate world and set off on this mission to transform lives, to get people from where they are now to where they want to be. There was only one problem: imposter syndrome. I spent the next 2 years working through the thought that nobody will take me seriously as a business owner or hire me on as a coach because I look too young. Most women strive for that youthful glow, and I've always feared it. I've always been afraid of it, especially when it comes to starting my own business. So this brings us to the first step of overcoming imposter syndrome, which is analyze the thought. Remember that thoughts lead to emotions and emotions lead to actions. So my thought, nobody will take me seriously as a business owner or hire me on as a coach because I look too young. It's important to ask ourselves questions about this and to really dive in deep. So the first step here is asking, where did that thought come from? Typically, the thought is created in childhood to protect us from something. In my example, I was the youngest person in my graduating class in high school. I started school at 4 years old. And as a result, everyone was ahead of me in getting their braces and dating, getting their driver's licenses. I was always at least a year behind my peers. And I always felt so incredibly inadequate as a result. My entire youth, being young and looking even younger, meant that I wasn't taken seriously because I just looked too young to have an educated opinion about anything. So most teachers ignored me. I did well in school, but I kept to myself. I didn't speak up much. I didn't try out for the lead in theater because I had created this imposter monster who told me all the time, don't do it. They won't take you seriously. You look too young. And at the time, that served a purpose, right? It protected me from my fear of ridicule, my fear of being dismissed or thought of as silly. But today, decades later, the question is, how is that thought serving me now? Do I still need the protection from being thought of as silly? No, I don't. I'm a grown woman. I'm educated, I'm experienced, I add value, and I gave birth to a 10-pound baby. I can literally do anything. So to summarize, the first step in overcoming imposter syndrome, we analyze the thought. We ask ourselves, where did that thought come from? What purpose did it serve me back then when it started? How is it serving me now? Is it still necessary? Right? And I'm looking at the chat right here and I'm seeing a bunch of people, Elisa, I'm 4'11", so I can completely relate, right? Like it's a big imposter syndrome moment to feel like I don't look old enough, right? No one's going to take me seriously. So if you're like me at this point in the process, you're thinking, this is all really cool, Erin, this step one, but I'm still kind of scared to take that leap into the thing I want to do. Because chances are at the end of step one, you still have some lingering fear, which is completely normal. You've been operating this way your entire life, giving your imposter monster a nice cozy home up there in that brain of yours. So step two is all about analyzing that lingering fear. And the lingering fear that was left for me after I worked through the first part of realizing that I didn't need the support of this monster anymore was, I can't provide for my family without a steady paycheck. And that's a big deal. I'm the breadwinner in the family, right? And especially during a global pandemic, it's a big deal to feel like maybe I can't make enough money for the home, for everything that we want to continue the lifestyle that we want to have. But how true is it that I wouldn't be able to provide for my family? And testing those assumptions and asking yourself, how true is it, is really important in this step here, the assumptions and the limiting beliefs. So you can ask yourself things like, how true is that fear? What evidence do you have to support that fear? In my case, I really didn't have any evidence. I mean, I've always survived, right? So I didn't have any evidence to make that fear real. If you do somehow find the evidence to support the fear, how are the variables different this time? What has changed about you or the situation? And then how might the fear that you have be limiting you from what you really want? The last question, what's the worst that could happen if you make that leap? In my case, the worst that could happen was that I wouldn't make any money running LACUNA, and I would essentially be unemployed. Okay, completely valid fear, right? So then I worked through the scenario. Let's say that I was laid off tomorrow from my corporate job. What would I do? I would find other ways to create income. I know myself. I'm a survivor of a lot of things. I would make it work. I'd make it work. I know that about myself. So in step 2, it's all about analyzing those lingering fears and asking yourself all the questions that you're seeing on screen right here. And don't worry, I'll summarize all this at the end for you. So if you're furiously taking notes, you'll get it again at the end. But that's really what the analyzing the lingering fear is for step 2. Yep. And then Ava, I see a comment in the chat. Honestly, we have been getting in our own way. Yeah, that's imposter syndrome. It's getting in your own way. Exactly. So let's move on to step 3 here. This is reframing the thought. So remember, energy progression is the thoughts lead to the emotions, and then the emotions lead to the actions. And step 3, we create a more powerful way to reframe what the imposter monster is telling us. When you create new thoughts, you create those new neural pathways in your brain that we've been talking about. So think of it as a new path through the snow. The more you take this new path, the more established and the more smooth it becomes. It eventually becomes the easiest path to take. And in your brain, that's physically what you're doing when you're reframing your thoughts. You're creating a new path. And the more you think that new thought to yourself, the deeper that path is getting and the easier it is to take that path in the future. So my original thought, nobody will take me seriously as a business owner or hire me as a coach because I look too young. This led to the emotion of fear, which then led to the action of not pursuing my passion full time and staying in the corporate world for those 2 years after I started LACUNA, just staying there at CVS Health and thinking, I can't do this, no one will hire me. And so this thought continued to inflate Mr. Stay Puft, and it got him bigger and bigger and bigger. In step 3, we ask ourselves, what's a more powerful way to think about what the imposter monster is saying? And in my case, my new thought was, everyone will take me seriously because I add value. Remember in step 1, when I analyzed my thought and I asked myself if I still needed that protection? My answer was no, because I add value. Everyone will take me seriously because I add value. And what's more, if I left the corporate world, I wouldn't just be finding other ways to make income. I would be planting the seeds necessary to help grow this beautiful experience that is LACUNA. So this new thought led to the emotion of excitement and confidence, which then allowed me to make the decision to leave the corporate world and pursue my passion of coaching full time. So you can see how when you change the thought, you change the emotion. And then when you think a different way and you feel a different way, you change the action, you change the result. So to summarize the 3 steps as promised, we're going to first analyze the thought. Ask yourself, where does this fear come from? How did it serve me back then? How is it serving me now? Do I still need the protection? The second thing we're going to do is analyze the lingering fears. Are they assumptions, limiting beliefs? How true are they? Dig in and test out those assumptions and those limiting beliefs. Chances are you'll find out that it's a story that you've been telling yourself versus a fact. In step 3, reframe the thought. What's a more powerful way to think about what the imposter monster is telling you? Because if you change the thought, you change the emotion, and then you change the action. And remember that every thought you're telling yourself is a choice. And each thought is either inflating or deflating that imposter monster. Isn't the little guy cute there on the right? Yeah, the choice is entirely yours on the thought piece. So taking that pause, being mindful, and being intentional about the thoughts that you tell yourself following this process is how you overcome that imposter monster. And I do want to point out that this is a process that's not going to stick overnight. You know, just like when you're exercising a muscle for the first time and you pick up that dumbbell, it's not suddenly going to pop your bicep and be perfect, right? It's going to take some time to practice and to exercise. And you've probably spent your whole lives thinking the way you do about yourself, about having these self-doubts. And you've had 10 minutes with this new way of thinking, this process. So practice it. Strengthen that muscle of self-reflection. And every time the imposter syndrome thoughts creep in, start the process. Step 1, step 2, step 3. Excuse me. Eventually, you'll replace your old neural pathways with new positive ones. So do we have any questions? Anything from your side, Giselle? And I apologize, I'm coughing crazy now.
No, I'm good with the information, Erin. I think I've been, tapping into these steps in my own journey, and not necessarily battle, but working with my imposter monster and making him into that small little guy. But I am intrigued about others' experiences, and if maybe someone else wanted to share theirs. And I see there is a question from Ava. How can we be successful at reframing? And I will let Erin speak to this, but just like in what she was describing, and then what we talked about with mindfulness and kind of recreating those neural pathways, you create a new one when you choose to do something differently, when you pause and stop and get out of the habit of going back into that thought. Like, let's say you're approached with something new, either a new challenge at work or a new challenge at home or a tough conversation in a relationship. And instead of just habitually start talking as you normally would, or habitually tell yourself the story of I can't do it, or I'm not, I don't look old enough, or whatever your imposter monster, however that speaks to you, whatever story you tell yourself, instead of immediately going there, recognizing it. And the very first step is noticing it, which you guys have already done. So you're already well on your way in comparison to, if you hadn't come here and identified them, or people who might not know that they even have imposter syndrome, that this is just a normal thought. You recognizing that it's there is the first step. And then choosing, pausing, recognizing, and then choosing to think differently, to not let that story play on repeat, to listen a little more closely in that tough conversation. But so, and then it's not a plug that I'm throwing in for mindfulness. It's really real. The more you practice just, sticking your pant leg on the other, trying the left leg first as opposed to the right, the more you do those silly little mindfulness things, the more natural it becomes for that pause, for that, oh, I'm going to do it differently this time. So there's my answer to the how can we be successful at reframing. Don't worry about the end result of reframing every single time. Like, do little things that you can control, and then when you notice it, choose to do differently. And that will at least help you in that reframing process.
Yeah.
Erin,
Thank you, Giselle.
For sure.
Yeah, and Ava, repeatability is key in this, because remember, the new thought creates a new pathway. So the more you repeat the new thought, the more you tell yourself the new one, the more established that path becomes, and then the other path gets covered over, like the snow analogy, right? When it's snowing out, take the new path that you want to take, make that established, make that nice and clear. The snow will cover the old one. And then in your mind, you'll just start defaulting with the new thought.
So do you recommend that we do these affirmations like on a daily basis? I have this app that I've recorded my voice saying all these things. I am these, I am that. And I do listen. I read that book by, it's called The Miracle Morning, where you start your day with, prayer, mindfulness, yoga, meditation, silence, all these. And I've been doing it literally consistently, 2-3 times a week, not every day, because sometimes I gotta get out of bed and run out the door and do things. But it has helped me incredibly think that I can do certain things. And I have sat at the table in places that I never thought I would have the courage. And I have made things open up for me that are just absolutely incredible. I just got offered to be a continuity partner for one of the top financial advisors in the Northern Virginia area. And I am terrified. Like, I have to get all these higher accreditations, my Series 7, my CFP. And I'm like, sometimes I'm like, what the heck am I doing? But I would have never sat at the table and even put out there in the universe that I wanted to have a mentor to take me to the next level in this industry, when it just literally landed on my lap. I'll tell the story, but it's just that freaking insane. And now I have until January to to really complete all these accreditations. And I'm like, but these was so good for me. I needed these today. Thank you.
Yeah. So Ava, if you are approaching these things that you have to get done now with your affirmations, the thoughts that you tell yourself that you've recorded, how does that change the way you feel about the situation?
Well, I call it the ants, like ANT, like the automatic negative thoughts. Like it's like what Giselle was saying. Like I immediately like recognize them and I squash them. Like hell no, I'm powerful. I can do these. Like I, deserve the life that I've dreamed of. I deserve, go to the next level. I deserve. Like just being feeling worthy of getting to where you want to go. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of the times I'm like, I'm not even, who am I to think that I can kick ass and take names, right? Like, so in a way, it's just been sort of like an evolution for me that I've decided I'm there, I'm worthy.
Yeah. So Ava, when you're showing, I got muted somehow. Ava, when you're showing up with this new reframed thought and you're feeling worthy, how does that change the way that you act in these meetings that are coming up for you?
Well, I took Douglas to the meeting where I negotiated my contract. And I've never seen my husband so quiet in my entire life. We were sitting like with 3 people in a conference room and I negotiated, I want to, because I have established a really, like I have like some residual income from certain lines of business. So I told him I want to keep that. I want to keep, these line of business here, but I want to do XYZ with you guys. And it was a very unusual request. And I just was like, this is what I want. And I want a commission structure that is higher than what I have now, because if I wanted to stay at 70%, I would stay where I am. Right. So, and then I had to bring like my tax returns, show them like what kind of income I have. Like you can't even sit at the table without making 6 figures with these people, right? So I've done that. And we left, and like a couple days later, like a week later, the office manager called me, the onboarding girl, and said, yeah, well, you're in. They have accepted all of your requests. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, and Douglas complimented me. He says, you really handle yourself like super professional. And but then I got out of there and like I was like, shit, like, like what did I do? So I still have my ants going on. And like who do you think you are type of thing, but I did it, right? So anyway.
Yeah, but look at how successful you were when you reframed the thought and it changed the way you felt about the situation. And then that changed the way that you showed up in your professional self, right? And you and I have talked about the professional self versus the social self, right? That's great.
That really helped me. Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing your story, Ava. I see, I think Saul mentioned that Saul wanted to share an example as well. So Saul, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. It's actually, this is from last week. I hold monthly meetings with people that are directly reporting to the CEO of the company. So it's a pretty big project. And at this phase of the project, all my assumptions have been blown out of the water. Everything's different. Nobody's agreed on anything, typical. And last week, everybody's asking me, are you ready to stand in front of these guys? I said, no, I'm not. They're going to tear me apart, but it is what it is. I've got what I've got. And after I did my presentation, I presented the new issues. I presented the new action items to try and solve them. The room was quiet. Nobody said anything. It just said, thank you. I'm like, nobody fought me on this one. At the end of the meeting, I had the person that is reporting the second level below the CEO say, okay, I want to commend Saul because he's got the toughest project out here, the most complex one. It's got issues. We knew he was going to have issues, but he's tackling them and he's handling them and bringing up new solutions to it. So I want to commend him. And that actually blew me out of the water because I'm thinking they're going to turn me to bits. And basically what it came down to was me accepting that, okay, the only thing I can do is my best. I can't leave anything on the table. And whatever happens from that, you know, I can only be happy that I did my best. And second to that is, I guess, something that can help everybody is realize that just preparation is key, right? If you come in unprepared to those type of situations, yes, you are going to get torn apart. But you got to take the appropriate steps, look 2 steps ahead of it, and try to um, basically judge how people are going to react to the problem and try to already have an answer for that. And that's my issue, that I had those answers, but I still came in thinking that they're going to turn me apart, and it wasn't so.
So how will you reframe the thought for next time, knowing the reaction that you got the last time you presented on this very complex problem?
I would say how I can reframe that thought from eating me up alive is just that I can only do my best. I will do my best for this. I will not leave everything on the table. And y- I can only expect that much from me. I can't expect more than what I can actually give, right?
Absolutely. And Ava just said, yep, that's awesome. You can do hard things. So if you reframe the thought, Saul, the next time in this meeting that you're prepared, all you can do is your best. How does that change the way you feel?
It takes away a lot of the stress, of the situation. It relaxes me to a point, but it also gives me a little bit of more, gets me more focused on, okay, here's where I am. This is where I need to be. What I need to do to get there, and it kind of simplifies your life a little bit more when
Yeah.
you think about it that way.
Yeah, when you're less stressed and more focused, how does it change the way you perform in these presentations?
It just shows up even in the tone of your voice and your the it's only a Teams meeting, so they'll pick up on your level of preparedness just on the tone of your voice. So I think that helps a lot.
Absolutely. And so you just did the whole process right there, right? You've at the end, you've reframed that thought and it changed your emotion around it. It reduced the stress and then it changed the way that you show up when you're there. So what can you do to hold yourself accountable to have this new thought, to make sure you're repeating it over and over? How will you make sure that happens?
Well, I guess I don't know. I haven't figured that out yet, but um, I guess I have to go through that mental exercise of just repeating it to myself, making it a habit, I guess, of doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a couple of clients who I see who have joined us today, and I know a lot of folks like Post-it notes. So that's one of the things that I recommend is write the new thought down on a Post-it note and put it right there on one of your screens. Because what will happen is that if you're in a coaching session with me and then the imposter monster shows up again, and I'll say, okay, client, read me what's on that Post-it note. Just having it right there in front of you, that's all that you need. You've just got to repeat it because repeatability is key here. Thank you so much, Saul, for sharing that example. That's great. And
Yep.
congratulations. It sounds like you're doing great things.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And so let's do one more before we close this off with another mindfulness exercise here. Christy, I see you put some things in the chat here. Do you want to just quickly talk us through what's going on?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So 2 years ago, I was able to get my dream job, like the job that I have been working really hard to getting. And I got to the level and I was super excited. And then I realized, oh my, these people have been working at this level for years. They know the system in and out, and know everybody. And even the people that I was working with, that I was supposed to be not necessarily advising, but guiding, have also been in the system for a really long time. So I had this fear that anything that I said, they were automatically going to think I was dumb because they had so much more experience than I did. So this comes out in so many different parts of kind of like the work that I do. is really just trying to overcome that feeling that I also have worked in the behavioral health system for a long time. And I actually put the work in on my projects that I do. Where my challenge comes in is actually being able to present on those projects. Usually I ask my boss to do it for me, and he's just like, I mean, I can present, but you're the one who's doing all the hard work. And he really does want me to get that recognition, but I just, you know, I'm afraid. I have this fear that I'm not going to sound intelligent. I'm not going to sound articulate. They're all going to realize that for the past 2 years, I've just been kind of, you know, being an imposter, like pretending like I've been there.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's such a debilitating feeling to have because it's really keeping you from showing up the way that you want to, this fear. So, you know, if you're walking through the process, how true is the fear that you're having that people are going to criticize you for the things you say in these meetings?
I think that it is all, I think that what happened was the first couple of times that I was like, okay, I am going to present on something. I think maybe I was a little too green and didn't anticipate questions and kind of got, you know, knocked around a bit. And I think that took my confidence down a notch, especially coming from at my former job. I was kind of like the subject matter expert. I did trainings, you know, I did trainings, and I was kind of the go-to person for a lot of things. So I think that you know, when I think about like, what's the worst that could happen, you know, the team that I have is actually very supportive, and they have never once like said, oh no, that's a dumb question, or you're not making sense, or anything like that. So it's totally in my head.
Yeah. So what's, you know, knowing that it's in your head, and it sounds like the variables are a little bit different now because you've been at it for 2 years. You know, you're not green anymore. You've got all this experience and you've got a great supportive team around you. What's a more powerful thought to have before going into these meetings?
So one of the things that I have done, and kind of Saul spoke to it earlier, was I'm like very prepared. I do a lot of preparation before meetings. I try to anticipate questions. So I feel like what I should be saying is like, I am also experienced in the things that I'm doing. I have put hard work into this, and I should be able to present that hard work.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So if you think to yourself, I am prepared, I've put in hard work, how does that change the way you feel about the situation?
You know, I'm a person who hates surprises. So I think preparation makes me feel very confident. Well, not confident, but it taps down the anxiety, I think, a lot, and gives me more confidence.
That's
so
awesome.
I think having a certain level, I think having a certain level of kind of anxiety is good. It keeps you sharp.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's adrenaline.
But,
it keeps you on, it keeps you focused. It can certainly do that. So if what I'm hearing is that, you know, you are now confident because you're prepared, you're ready, you've done the research, you're prepared, you've got this confidence. How does that change the way that you show up in the next meeting that you have?
I think also, you know, as things have gotten more into, you know, things are virtual now, I do think it comes up a lot within, you know, in your tone of voice. I noticed that before meetings, I will sometimes not necessarily write a script, but I will write down points that I would like to touch on. And so I believe that has helped boost my confidence. And, you know, every day is different. Some days I'm super feel like I'm prepared for the meetings or prepared to, you know, facilitate. And then other days, you know, it's about rolling with it and kind of trying to keep that confidence at a consistent level.
Repeatability, Christy, write it down, put that affirmation on your laptop, right? And tell it to yourself 20 times a day before every single meeting. That's what it takes. It takes the repeatability of the thought to create that new neural pathway in your brain. Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm
Thank you.
honored at how just open and vulnerable everyone's being today. It's been an incredible experience for us. I hope it's been helpful for you. I know we're at the hour. If you want to stay on a few more minutes, Giselle's going to walk us through a quick chair yoga mindfulness exercise, and then we'll close out. So Giselle, I'll turn it over to you.
And I will keep it short. It will be just a couple poses. And again, I want to thank you for your vulnerability and opening up. This has been really beneficial for me too. So appreciate it. I'm going to ask you to just sit wherever you're sitting. Feel the sit bones ground. Feel the feet flat on the floor and stack the spine. Feel the breath move throughout the body just naturally. And on your next exhale, mindfully exhale completely. Maybe close the eyes and then inhale through the nose, holding at the top. Exhale through the mouth, maybe a slight ha sound. Pausing at the bottom. Now allow the breath to fall naturally again. And blink open the eyes. Take your right hand and place it on the chair behind you. Feel free to adjust if you need to scoot a little forward. You could also place it on the armrest if your chair has an armrest, and the left hand to the outside of the right thigh, coming into a twist here. So inhale, find length in the spine. As you exhale, use that left hand for leverage and twist to your right. Maintaining the knees level, so keeping the hips square, turning your shoulders to the side. Press down a little more firmly through the right hand to lengthen. And exhale, deepen. Maybe the gaze shifts over the right shoulder at the end. And then release. Slowly come back to center. We'll switch it out. Left hand behind you on your chair, maybe a grip on the bottom or on the armrest. Right hand to the outside of the left thigh. And if that's too much, you can place it on the inside of the right thigh just to get leverage. Inhale, lengthen the spine. Exhale, right hand for leverage as you come into your twist on the left side. Notice the difference on this side. Where can you release a little tension? Maybe the gaze shifts over the left shoulder at the end. And release. Come back to center. Place the hands on the thighs or maybe palms up. Relax the shoulders down. Bring the right ear to the right shoulder. Back to center. Left ear to the left shoulder. Center. And set a steady gaze. And if it's calling to you, maybe close the eyes. Take a deep breath in. Slow breath out. Honoring all that you have done today. Let your breath come to a natural rhythm. And just know that everything that was shared and said today was exactly what was meant to be and was enough. Allow yourself to come into a way of being that will serve you throughout the rest of your day. One more full cycle of breath on your own. And gently blink open the eyes. And with gratitude, I leave you. Thanks so much, you guys.
Thanks everyone for joining today. Have an awesome day.
Bye. Thank you.